As long as you put the right metadata and as long as you understand what you're trying to achieve in your preservation repository, then you can really free up the access to that data and make it accessible to far more people.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to our Fireside Chats. I'm joined again by Mark Smith. We're at week 6 and we're discussing cost efficiency within digital preservation. I think we're also going to touch a little bit, Mark, maybe on even commercialising platforms. So I guess cost is a factor for everybody. You know, every conversation we have at some stage highlights cost and comes back to cost. I think my standard takeaway is by planning things right at the outset, by investing that time at the beginning, you'd like to have a more efficient solution ultimately, and over the period of time you utilise the platform and into the future. What are the sort of key takeaways and what considerations for customers?
I mean, depends on the use case. You know, if you're a digital first organisation where all of your important data is digital, then sometimes maybe the savings aren't immediately as obvious as they might be. But say you're an organisation that's got paper-based archives. So I don't know, you've got some sort of cultural archive, you're a museum, and you've got books or you've got art. If you bring that into a digital preservation solution, you know, you're going to go through the process of digitising it. And without a doubt, it can be quite a painful process to digitise all of your paper. You know, there's a lot of paper. There's a lot of artefacts that need to be digitised. And if, for instance, if it's a book, then we're ultimately going to wear those artefacts as we digitise them. But just remember, we're going to wear them once. You know, we're going to open them, we're going to scan them, we're going to ingest them into the archive or the preservation platform. And we're also going to put some really meaningful metadata along with them. And so that metadata enables us to find that piece of work really quickly. So we do that once, and you look at that in comparison to having a library, for instance, where users can come in and peruse, find a book, read it, open it. We've certainly seen, you know, the lockdown years, that we're still, to a degree, sort of just coming out the edge of. But so how do you go and look at a really interesting manuscript or piece of work in a library when you're not allowed to go to a library? So digitising it, you know, has a fantastic improvement in accessibility, but also removes the wear because you only access it once and then everyone accesses it digitally. And as you bring all of those collections together and make them digital, as long as you put the right metadata and as long as you understand what you're trying to achieve in your preservation repository, then you can really free up the access to that data and make it accessible to far more people. But also you can globalise your repository because everyone can access it remotely. And I guess that also means that those original artefacts that you've digitised are going to last longer because you're not accessing them and you're not wearing them. Yeah. And I think that's an important, that's an important aspect to digitising and creating a digital preservation solution is the preservation of the actual works that we're digitising.
I think something we both witnessed as well is taking those cultural type customers. The actual displayed part of their artefacts is only a tiny proportion of what they necessarily have in store. So actually being able to bring those to schools, to interested parties, by being able to sort of have almost run virtual displays, virtual themed events.
Yeah, like a virtual
online. Exhibition
or something.
It's becoming more prevalent in the marketplace now, or more prevalent in that sector now.
You could very well see, a collection that's available digitally. It might be that you offer, once you've digitised it, you've got a multitude of different ways that you could, in theory, monetise that collection. So whether it be a virtual exhibition, a virtual show, and as you say, we're very well aware a lot of the galleries and museums and institutions we've worked with, have a massive back stock of items that they can't put out on display. So that's why you see the sort of exhibition cycle where they'll run an exhibition about a particular artist or a particular genre, and they'll get a load of their extra works out and they'll put them in an exhibition. But they can't do that all the time because there's not enough space for everything. So by digitising, you actually free up the whole collection, not just a very small part of it. And you could well imagine, a gallery might only be able to display a quarter of their works with the wall space they've got, and so to make all of their pieces of work available and also allow you to download them and maybe even to embed them into your graphics or your pieces of work or whatever your organisation might want to do with those, you could monetize that collection by making a small charge that helps support the collection. Because a lot of our customers are not-for-profit, a lot of our customers are charity. We're always really mindful that every pound that a customer spends on tech is a pound they can't spend on science or the arts or education. So making it the most efficient platform we can, but also giving them some ideas about how they can actually generate some funding. I wouldn't say necessarily profit, but funding from their collections. And as those collections are digitised, of course, then they're just easily available, and it's very easy to find ways of raising some funding from making those collections available.
And I guess it's a broad audience, it's a global audience at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Online. So thanks, Mark. So we've talked about sort of opportunity to monetize data, and again, I think a lot of the time that's actually about maybe covering the cost of a platform or supporting the cost of a platform rather than necessarily making a profit, which we appreciate. But there's also, I guess, within digital preservation, the consideration of planning at the start to make sure the long-term costs are considered and the platform's right, because we're not talking about 5 years, we're talking about multiple years. We've talked about migration between platforms, technological obsolescence, those sorts of things. So what are the key considerations for a customer?
So I think it's a really good point, because you take a cultural collection that might be on display, you can only display a portion of it. If you move to a digital collection, you might still have some displayed, but there's no labour involved in accessing the collection. There's no wear on the artefacts, as mentioned before, but there's no labour involved in finding a particular artefact or a particular document, say, and presenting it back. There's no on-demand scanning, or there's no putting it out to a reading room, for instance, that you might find in a large library. So we don't have that problem once we digitise. But also, there are hidden costs around working with those big sets of data. And management, we talked about before, management is a really big part of it, but also costs associated with the solution as it grows, but also as it ages. So an organisation that has a solution for 25 years will not necessarily have the funding in place for 25 years. So getting a solution that scales, but also you know how you could migrate from it if you needed to change systems. If your technology desire, need, remit change significantly, say from on-prem to cloud first, with all the considerations that cloud might bring, going into that project with a clear view around what future costs might be, what the financial liability might be. And we do see a lot of customers who go cloud, who pay monthly or pay annually for the cloud service. After a while it dawns on them that is going to be a thing that they are going to be paying for forever. They can't get away from it. Once the data's up there, they've got nowhere else to put it. An on-premise solution, all right, so you're still going to pay for it, but you can choose to sweat that asset over 3 years, over 5 years. If you can, maybe over 7 years, you have a bit more flexibility on-prem, but you can, I guess those costs can be variable, where a public cloud-based solution, you're sort of, you're tied into that unless you try and get your data out.
Okay, so I guess, as previously mentioned, then it is about early planning and about that engagement. I know we talk a lot in digital preservation particularly, but engagement with a customer gives a better outcome ultimately. And I say it's not a sort of almost topic that lends itself to black and white tender, for instance.
Yeah, and I think understanding the commercial model they want it to fit within at the start, it's looking at the financial constraints and the financial model that customer needs to employ, rather than just the technical requirements and I guess the preservation workflow, because these solutions need paying for, and they will need paying for over an extended period of time, because the solution is going to live for a long time. So that data mobility gives you a bit of freedom. If you go into the project knowing how you can migrate the data from the platform you've chosen, gives you a bit of freedom, takes a little bit of the stress away, but also understanding that if you build a solution for a 5-year project, you do have the ability to go to 6 or 7 years in the same platform while you win yourself some funding time, maybe at the end, and making sure Yeah, you go in at the start thinking about all of the aspects of the project, not just the data, not just the applications, but also the funding, and I guess how you as a customer want to pay for that particular solution.
So I think we mentioned it in an earlier conversation. Almost the exit is almost some degree the starting point as well, because you have to consider, as I say, your funding cycle, the platform's life cycle. But the data is the bit that you have to keep for the long term. Fantastic. Thank you, Mark.
No, thanks, James.
Thank you for watching, and we look forward to joining you next week.